Hello, Connecticut, and welcome to the Paid Leave Podcast. The title basically says it all. I'm Nancy Barrow, and I will be delving into this new state program and how it can help you and your family. This podcast will give you information you should know about Connecticut paid leave and maybe just a little bit more. Connecticut paid leave brings peace of mind to your home, family, and workplace. Welcome to the Paid Leave Podcast. Today we're talking about adoption, and thanks for joining me. Under Connecticut paid leave, if you qualify, you can get up to 12 weeks of income replacement for bonding leave if you're adding to your family by birth, fostering, or adoption. And bonding leave is available only to the parent of a child. However, parent means biological, adopted, or foster parent, step parent, person standing in loco parentis to a child, or a person who has legal guardianship or custody of a child. I just wanted to let everybody know what Connecticut paid leave does and how it's very inclusive. So joining me today, I have great guests. Adoptive parent John Pica-Sneeden. John is the executive director of the Connecticut Gay and Lesbian Chamber, father of 5 adopted children and 1 foster son on the way to being adopted. You are the poster child for adoption, John. And Allison Casagino, foster care specialist at Wheeler Clinic in Plainville, and who has worked with John to help him foster and adopt his children. And the president of the Connecticut Council on Adoption, Susan Meyers, who is also an adoptive mom of 2 young adults and has 20 years experience in adoption. And what other titles do you hold, Susan?
I'm an adoption social worker on staff at Family and Children's Agency, which is located in Branford.
And what does that agency do?
Family and Children's Agency is a multi-service, very large agency that provides a range of human services for all types of situations that are encountered by children and families. So we do a lot of different projects, all designed to support families. I am part of the adoption department.
And tell me what the Connecticut Council on Adoption is.
It's actually a voluntary membership organization for anyone who is touched by adoption, adoptive parents, adoptees, adoption professionals. We have some birth parents, attorneys. Connecticut Council on Adoption is over 40 years old and is really here to promote positive and supportive ethical adoption in Connecticut and enhance collaboration between agencies, between providers. So we put on a couple of big trainings every year. That's probably our biggest. What we're known for is that we hold 2 large programs every year, one in November, one in June. And we have meetings throughout the year on other issues related to adoption. So we are, a membership-based organization, but membership is very affordable. It's $20 for an individual to join for the year. And there are a lot of benefits to it.
John, let's start with you because you and I met at the YWCA event and we started talking. And when you said you had 5 adopted kids, I was like, oh, you'd be great for a podcast. I mean, how did that all start? When did you know you wanted to have a family?
34 years ago. My husband and I met about 37 years ago. We moved to Connecticut and opened a business, bought a house. The next thing was children. And so neither one of us have a womb. So a friend of mine said, what about adoption? Of course, we never really would have thought that adoption would have been, in the wheelhouse because, being gay people, again, going back 34 years.
Yeah.
We worked with the Village of Children and Families. We started with them 33 years ago. They really, welcomed us with open arms, but it was still a battle to get a child. And we had a business at the time, so they really didn't want a baby. So we asked for, a child that would have been, school age. It took 3 years. They literally handed him to us.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Is that normal?
No.
Oh, okay. Was it anything that you expected it to be?
No.
Okay, because I was wondering what your expectations might be of being a parent and, you're married. And how did that work for you?
That's a really good question because we just went in head first. It was about this kid that was abused, this kid that was neglected severely, and nobody wanted him. So when you get that feeling of, okay, how can we fix this? How can we help this young person to become somebody that in our society to have value. That's pretty much what drives us, my husband and I. And that was very, it was not easy because he was 12 years old. He came from a town up in the northern part of Maine, like you could literally spit to Canada. And he was 12. He didn't know how to go to the bathroom.
And did anybody help you? Like, where did you go to get services, or did you know where to
They
get?
didn't have that stuff back then. The village, offered stuff, to us, support groups, all of that, which we went to, and parties, they threw for the kids. DCF at the time didn't have that much. And if they did, we didn't know about it. But as time went on, and after adding another son and another son and another son and then a daughter, and now, of course, our son now, who's 16, who's amazing.
How do you help them when no one gives you the tools to help them? How did you know how to help them?
Well, I didn't. I'm going to be honest. I didn't know how to help them. But you go on instinct.
So after your first child, someone contacted you and said, would you like to do this again?
Yes.
And you said yes.
Yes, because we had such a great success rate with our first son.
You did?
Yeah.
How long did it take for you to see a difference in him? Did it happen?
I'm still waiting.
He's 41.
He's 41. One of the things, and I know Alice and I, we talked about this, these children are special. They're your children. But every time a child came into Brian and my home, they were not treated like a foster child, ever. We didn't even introduce them as a foster child. We just said, this is our son. That speaks volumes to that child, that you're not segregating that child to be something different. They've already gone to hell and back.
Right.
So all they want is normalcy.
So, Allison, what is it about John? What do you look for in a parent?
I love him and his husband. They are just the epitome of what a foster parent and adoptive parent, the qualities that they should hold. Their experience, their patience. These children have significant trauma coming into foster care. They've, like John said, they've been through hell and back. They've been abused, neglected, and abandoned. And what they need is someone to just let them know, both emotionally and just physically, that they're not just a guest in their home, that they could leave at any moment. Because for some foster children, a lot of foster children, that is their fear. One of their fears is, how long am I going to be in this home? Maybe they've been, removed from other foster homes. So John and Brian, just their patience, I think them treating children not like their foster children. John and Brian do this amazing thing. Children who are in the care of the Department of Children and Families, you can't take pictures and post them on social media and everything like that for privacy, but you can take pictures of them and post them up in your home. So from day one of John and Brian meeting a child, they'll take a picture. And then the next time that child comes to their home for a visit, that picture is on the mantle with all the other family pictures.
That is true.
There's an inclusive atmosphere at your home.
Yes.
And that's probably something that they've been missing in their whole life.
And also stop and think like what Allison just said, and Nancy, what you just said about inclusiveness. As a gay person, that's all we want in the society that we live in, is to be included. And so we just related how we feel in the society that we live in to, here's a child who's probably, and I hate to use this word, normal, but has had so many tragic things happen to them, and all they want to be is normal.
Susan, what are your thoughts when you're listening to this? What are you thinking? Is this amazing to you, or is it something that you see a lot of?
I have heard about it. I've seen it. My oldest child, we adopted 29 years ago, but internationally. But there are a lot of similarities between the backgrounds of children in the foster care system here in the U.S. and children who, come to the U.S. through international adoption. There's a reason why they can't live with their biological family, But we have definitely come a long way, I would say, in the past 15 years. I don't know if John and Allison agree, but I think that training,
Yes, I do.
preparation, education for parents, and services for the whole family after the adoption have really grown immensely in the past 15 years.
And what about international adoption, since you mentioned that? Have they changed since 29 years ago?
Yes, it has changed dramatically. There are far fewer international adoptions into the United States now than there were then. I think the peak of intercountry adoption to the U.S. was around 2004, 2005. And at that time, there were maybe 20,000 children coming from all over the world. And they were babies, toddlers, and older kids. Now, most of the intercountry adoptions are children who are 4 or 5 years old and older. So there are far fewer countries that are willing to place children for international adoption into the U.S., and the children's needs are different. So there are more older children with special needs.
And so how do you prepare a family for international adoption? Is it different than a regular adoption?
Yeah, it is a little different because of that fact that the children are older and they have experienced trauma. So there's consequences to their development from having lived in an orphanage, number one, because primarily, here in the U.S., there are no more orphanages. All children who don't have who can't live with their family live in foster homes. But in other countries, in most other countries, that's not the case. There's still institutional care. And that has its own effects on children's social and emotional development. So the training that we do for international adoption is more intensive than what we do for a domestic adoption, just because of the nature of the needs of the kids. It isn't 30 hours, though. I will say that it isn't to the level of the TIPS MAP training, which is, probably the highest.
So what do you do culturally for the shock of a child coming into a completely different culture and may not speak the language?
Yeah, well, the good thing is that none of these adoptions move quickly. So parents have a lot of time to prepare. So we do, every country has its own requirements, mm-hmm. and most do require some specific training on the culture, the food, the customs, the traditions of that country. And so parents are required to do that. We also find that talking to other families who've adopted from that country is really valuable. So talking to other experienced families who've gone through the adoption process. So we try to connect people whenever we can with mentors, right? Other adoptive families who've been down that road. And yeah, I always recommend to families who are adopting a child over the age of 2, which is what most intercountry adoptions are now, that they try to learn some of the vocabulary and some of the comfort language that child will need when they come into their home, right? So the, kind of basic terminology that you would want to use with a young child. And of course, being able to say, I love you and I will take care of you and I'll keep you safe are very important too.
You're a social worker. And did any of that counseling or training in your background help you?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that as a young parent, I thought it would. Like, I think I expected, I know this, but yeah, I think the experience of raising children is one of the most challenging that anybody, being a parent is a hard job. I mean, my children were both babies when they came home, not newborns, but they were under 2 years old. They were both around a year old. So, I did have the chance to see their development and to, feel that I was able to, learn who they were, right? As opposed to an older child coming in who already has their personality and, all of those things, their temperament that you need to learn. But still, yeah, I think that, I made plenty of mistakes and my education wasn't really that helpful.
So when is the conversation with a small child? Like you got infants. When do you tell them, they were adopted? Or, when is that conversation?
That's a great question because we hear that so many times from adopted parents and hear so much anxiety about that question, right? And about how to do that. Our recommendation now professionally, and it has been for a while, is to always have that be a part of their story and of their life. So there's no one time where you sit down with them and say, guess what? I have to tell you that I didn't give birth to you. We started with books when my children were toddlers. And that's what I recommend to families now, even to babies, to read storybooks about adoption, about different kinds of families, about diversity, if it's a transracial adoption, about how people can be different but still love each other and belong together. So there's a vast library now, much more than there was 25 years ago. There's a vast library available online of children's books about adoption. So those conversations should just be natural and part of like everyday life. And then there's never a big shock.
Yeah. You brought up something really good about LGBTQ kids or gender identity kids. Is there training for that now? Or has there been training for that?
For adoptive parents?
Yeah.
No, there really isn't a lot.
Do you think that's going to change?
I hope it will, as it becomes more common for LGBT families to be formed through adoption, and also for, parents to understand their kids, who their kids may become.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily know that, and they can't control who their children will become.
The pre-service training is pretty generalized. It covers a wide gamut of topics. And again, that's pretty standard for the state of Connecticut for foster and adoptive. But what Wheeler and other DCF, any foster care agency does is post-training requirements, and we cater it to each family at Wheeler. Mm-hmm. So if you do have a child that identifies as LGBTQ, we help. There's specific services at Wheeler. We have a Walk With Me program, which is incredible. And we have additional trainings and supports on how you could support your child through their journey. Wheeler does offer post-training, and we cater it to each child's need, each family's need. And yes, we definitely cover the LGBT.
And what if the child is a different race? What kind of training do we have on minorities? Because I think that's really important.
At Wheeler, we welcome diversity. Our foster families are very diverse. And it's so important because our children are so diverse.
Right.
So there's 2 federal laws in place that say, you should try to match a child to a home that's as close to their culture and race as possible. Mm-hmm. But you can't not match a child to a good home if they are of an opposite race and culture. So with that being said, a lot of the TIPS map covers cultural diversity and how to support and maintain a child's connection to their culture. Foster parents in the state of Connecticut are required to, if a child comes to your home and they're of a different faith, they are not required to attend your religion or vice versa. But you as the foster parent are required and encouraged to make sure that they can practice their faith of origin.
Kids are coming into the system that are identifying at a younger age as an LGBTQ and are being either thrown out of their homes or beaten, especially children of color, and becoming more trans, and parents just can't deal with it. So I had said to Brian, why don't we take in a gay kid? We were very specific, and Allison could testify to this, very specific. We wanted a boy, and it was all done perfectly.
We work in partnership. So all children in foster care are in care through the Department of Children and Families. Right. DCF partners with agencies such as Wheeler for placement of children who tend to be older or have therapeutic needs.
Families.
And that's what you are, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And is the training different for?
I would say, yeah. I think you're more aware of the kind of child that you might get. Would you say that?
It's very similar. DCF does do an excellent job with the implementing the therapeutic training and components, because all children in foster care have experienced some level of trauma. I mean, just the removal from their home and being placed with non-relatives, non-family members, that's a huge loss. That's so scary for a child. So they'll have a set of behaviors and a set of needs as a result of those experiences. So, DCF contacts their partner agencies for the placement of some of the children.
So when you get a child, do you already have an idea of a foster parent that comes to mind that this child might fit in very well with?
Sometimes. So we do matches both ways. So we know our families and we know, what they feel they can manage in their home, what they want, if there's a certain age or gender. But then it's really about the needs and the strengths of the parents to help meet those needs. So
Right.
children, I keep using the word trauma, but trauma it can be caused for many different things. But it's a loss or it's something horrific that they've endured, and that I feel like this parent could help them cope and maneuver through the situation and heal because they possess a certain set of skills. So,
Right.
and the same goes for the child. We ask the child, what they are looking for in a family, and what DCF asks. We have communications with the Department of Children and Families, and it's really about making that match.
Susan, do you recruit, or how do you help people?
We do recruit adoptive families. It's a little bit different with a private agency versus an agency that's
Right.
partnering with DCF, like Wheeler is. But my agency also has a foster care department, and a therapeutic foster care. So they are always looking for foster parents, for sure. There's always a need for foster parents. We offer informational meetings every month. We've been doing them virtually since COVID started, and that is a convenience, because people don't need to leave their home. They can log in and learn about adoption.
Sure.
So we do, have recruitment through informational meetings and through our website, and just through, general communications. We're always putting the word out about, how you can adopt. So our agency, Family and Children's Agency, requires 10 hours of pre-service training, like Allison was saying. So pre-adoption training, total of 10 hours. We do a 6-hour seminar that all families have to attend before they can be approved to adopt. And then we have them collect the other 4 hours through a variety of either online or reading or, specific family-specific training. So they do, have to go through the pre-approval processes, the training, and what's called a home study. All families have to do a home study. And that's basically a collection of documents, a background, several background checks, federal, state, and DCF, and a series of interviews with their social worker. So putting all of that documentation together and writing it up is the job of the social worker. And then that home study approves the family for adoption of a specific, age range for the child, specific races, and health and medical issues. So some families are looking for a special needs child. They have, they feel they have the ability to, adopt a child with Down syndrome, for example, or a child who's hearing impaired, or a child who has a heart defect and needs surgery. Other families say, no, we can't, we can only adopt a child who's as healthy as possible. So there's a lot of factors that go into that decision.
I found this article in the New Haven Register, and it says that the U.S. remains the only advanced economy without federal paid leave, despite support, but employers are free to provide this benefit at their own expense. But only 1 in 4 U.S. workers, including federal employees, can take paid time off to care for a newborn, a newly adopted, or a foster child. And they say it's really a huge problem because for many reasons, including the abundant evidence that paid leave boosts healthy childhood development and economic security. And what are your thoughts on that whole situation? Do you agree? Would paid leave have been good for you, John?
I do like the fact that I would have had the option.
Right. Right.
I didn't have the option then.
When you have an adoptive family or you're getting a foster family, do you tell them that they have to take a little bit of time off? You should expect to take some time off with your child, or you may have to take your child to therapy, or you may have to take your child to medical appointments.
So part of the home study process is we ask about their job flexibility. Does your employer know that you're doing this? Are they willing to give you a day here? You are jumping into the role of a parent. So when they're sick at school,
Yeah.
you need to pick them up. If they get suspended from school or expelled, you need to pick them up. You need to bring them to doctor's appointments, therapy appointments. You need to do everything a parent, the parent role does. So having an employer be accommodating like that is very important. We don't require it from our foster parents, but we definitely prepare them and tell them, your child, specifically with foster care, comes with a team of social workers, lawyers, therapists.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a whole team that comes with a foster child. Again, it's to be a support to the family and the child. But with that comes appointments and needing to take an hour here, some time here. So making sure your employer is flexible with that. So with this new paid leave, it's incredible for those who might, their employer might be more strict or might not have that flexibility.
Yeah, because it doesn't mean you have to take the 12 weeks of paid leave at one block. It can, you can break it up. It can be intermittent or reduced schedule that you need. So I feel that it's a great tool to use if you qualify for it. It's wonderful that Connecticut has it, and the rest of the United States needs to catch up. We need a federal program, really. I mean, we're the only industrialized nation that doesn't have it. And I think that it would help families in general. Tell me if any of the birth parents ever tried to get their child back. Has that ever happened in the adoptive world?
Definitely, it can happen. And every state has different laws around the time frame that birth parents have to change their mind, which is a good thing, because making the decision to place a baby voluntarily for adoption is a completely different decision than having DCF involved in your life, right? Because of neglect or abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So making the voluntary decision to place your baby with an adoptive family for a woman and a man, if he's involved with the situation, it's a very difficult decision. So in every state, there's a certain amount of time given by law for them to change that decision before the baby is legally adopted. That can range from 24 hours in some states to, here in Connecticut, it can be 6 weeks or 8 weeks even.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that
Some
either.
states are even longer than that too, correct?
I'm not aware of anybody that's longer than here, we can go 40 to 45 days easily before there's a court hearing in a private adoption situation. And they have that 40 to 45 days to rescind their consent. That's a protection for children. That's a protection for children as well as for birth parents, that they should have the ability to say, I made a mistake. I do feel that I'm going to be able to parent this baby, or I have support in my family, which is more commonly the reason why a birth mom might change her mind, because there is support in her extended family to help her raise the baby or to raise the baby. And, we know that children are, better off to be able to be raised by their family.
I actually had a case where a foster and adoptive family, a foster to adoptive family had, I think their child was 4 or 5 at the time, and he had some significant medical issues, and they, were having to take him for testing to try to figure out what he needed medically. And because that adoptive family had maintained a connection with the biological grandmother, she came to the medical appointments with the family and was able to give history on this child.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And he received, as a result, life-saving medical attention because the foster and adoptive family, in this case, was able to have that connection.
That's amazing.
I've seen those connections work well in many, many circumstances.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. So, Susan, when you have, special needs kids that go into adoptive homes, do you also follow up with care and therapy or support groups, or what do you do?
Well, for us with private adoption, there's usually a period of at least 6 months after the child is placed in the home that we do follow-up visits. We usually do those monthly visits and provide support to the family and in terms of connecting them to resources in the community for as long as they need. But we do that monitoring kind of that monthly home visiting and follow up until the adoption is finalized in court, which is usually, like I said, about 6 months after the child is placed. But we're always available to families for support if they need it. And we can, because we are similar to Wheeler, a multi-service agency, and have lots of different programs, including in-home therapy and case management. And, we can help the family through other programs if they need it. I wanted to mention also that there's a free service in Connecticut called the Adoption Assistance Program. I think you spoke with Jocelyn there.
I sure did.
It's operated partially through UConn Health Center in Farmington. So Adoption Assistance Program is available for that kind of ongoing post-adoption support for families.
What did you learn about yourself as a parent? Like, what did you learn about yourself as a person?
The capacity that I have to care about people and how to accept everybody for who they are, not my expectations of them.
That's beautiful. I wish everybody could learn that about themselves, John. That's pretty amazing. John Pica-Sneeden, thank you so much. You're director of the Connecticut Gay and Lesbian Chamber.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming in here and being so open and candid about everything.
Thank you.
It was really interesting hearing your story. And Allison Casagino, foster care specialist at Wheeler Clinic in Plainville, thank you for being his friend. Thank you for getting his family. I think that his kids are very lucky to have him as a parent. And of course, the president of the Connecticut Council on Adoption, Susan Meyers, I can't thank you enough. You're adoptive mom. Thanks for lending all your expertise to this podcast.
My pleasure.
For more information on Connecticut paid leave and how you may qualify for 12 weeks of income replacement for bonding leave if you're adding to your family by birth, fostering, or adoption, you can go to ctpaidleave.org. This has been another edition of the Paid Leave Podcast. Please like and subscribe so you'll be notified about new podcasts that become available. Connecticut Paid Leave is a public act with a personal purpose. I'm Nancy Barrow, and thanks for listening.